pitches. Hey, just you're basically trying to boil the ocean, as we say. You want to know specifically of why you're reaching out to certain brands if you want to get, NIL deals. And that leads me to my next question. How many people do you have reaching out to you per day? They probably saw this. They saw a lot of traffic. Like, how many people are reaching out to you?
I will say there was definitely an influx the moment this partnership was announced. It's not, I wouldn't say it's every day. I would say it's probably more like bi-weekly. And there are athletes that reach out directly.
Mm-hmm.
We do get some of those, but most of the time it's reps, and they represent either a handful or sometimes a couple dozen athletes, depending on who you're speaking with. So they're almost always kind of reaching out through email. That's the common methodology. I may have gotten one through LinkedIn, but that's it. They usually don't kind of cold call. Starts with email.
Welcome to my first NIL here, where we're going to discuss all the latest information about the NIL deals of what's going on in this landscape, this new medium that a lot of different companies are hopping into. And I have another gentleman on my screen here, Kevin Price, CMO of L81, here to talk about strategy, what we're looking for, what we should be doing when we're talking about getting into NIL as well. Before we get into the conversation, make sure you subscribe to the channel. As I said before, we're going to bring you all the latest information about NIL and what we can do to hop into this new marketing strategy. So, Kevin, thank you for taking time to chat with us about your NIL strategy.
I'm happy to be here.
So, Kevin, we just want to we're getting in the conversation. Before we get into any particulars about strategy, NIL, and kind of how you've viewed that and what's worked for you. Talk a little bit about your brand, L81. What is that? So for people can get some understanding of what that is.
So L81 is a soda. It's produced right here in Kentucky. It's a take on ginger ale. Let's put it that way. And it's got a great flavor, but we also have brand innovation. So we're always looking to add new flavors to our lineup. We've had some great successes with cherry, orange cream, and blackberry recently, and we're going to keep up that flow in 2023.
So it's only regional, only to Kentucky to cut.
It's largely regional. You can find it pretty much anywhere, but if you're far west coast to find it, you're likely going to need to go to like one of these small boutique like soda shops to find it. But regionally, it's pretty easy to find.
Yeah, I have a lot of stories about regional sodas we can get into. I'm from Missouri, so neighboring state, but Vest Soda, RC, was some of my childhood soda companies that I grew up with. So a lot of stories there. But as we all know, we're here for this conversation for NIL, the exciting stuff, kind of what's going on. You hopped into this space. That's about, 2023? So 2 years old now. Started in 2021. Mm-hmm. Kind of what was your thought in hopping into this? Why did you feel this would be tell us the story of how you came to think of this as a strategy for the brand.
Sure. So overall, NIL has been interesting to me for brands for that entire time. Admittedly, this is the first that I've jumped into, and there are a few key components of this arrangement that were perfect. The first being that Will is actually a fan; like he loves the product. He came here to play at University of Kentucky, got introduced to it, fell in love with it, and that's part of our core DNA. Our fans really drive the brand. We have what some people call almost like a cult-like following. So working with partners that really believe in the brand, appreciate the brand, understand kind of where we are and how to like meet us in the middle. And so Athlete Advantage was representing Will. They reached out, which also was a nice part of this arrangement, is they came to us with a clear understanding, again, of who we were, also a very clear understanding of Will. If you look at his other arrangements, there are other brands that he does have a clear affinity for. So what I liked that was admittedly a little different than how some of the other representatives come to you. A lot of them admittedly come to you almost with like a buffet. It's like, here's all these athletes we represent, but there's not a clear connection of like why they're reaching out or which particular athlete really is a good fit. In this case, they came to us with that thought process. So as far as that part of the strategic thinking, it made my job pretty easy, to be honest.
Yeah, and for the audience, he's mentioned Will Levis, Kentucky quarterback from the University of Kentucky, probably going to be a top 20 NFL draft pick. And
We hope so.
yeah, for sure. And I want people to pick up on. He said they came to you very specific approach of what they were looking for, not a buffet of things. So a tip for those that are watching this that are trying to capture NIL deals is be specific. Wouldn't you say?
Correct. Because, and when I say buffet, a lot of these reps, it'll be anything from already, professional athletes, whether that's NFL, MLB, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But they also are representing collegiate athletes. So it's one of those things like, sure, I will do the diligence on my end of thinking through who on that roster might be a good fit. And I always vet these as they come through. But at the same time, they introduce it and in most cases haven't really identified who's a good fit. Because as you mentioned before, like a perfect thing for us is, or a perfect thing to think about is we're a regional brand at the moment. Of course, we're always looking to grow, but realistically, that's our current footprint. So if someone comes to us with, a specific athlete with a national audience that doesn't, have a connection to this region, then there's just no reason for me to like spend much time,
Right.
vetting that candidate any further. So it's just one of those things like, as far as you're talking about tips, like just a small amount of diligence, as far as like just understanding the brands really draws in this case, CMOs a little quicker.
Yeah, so make sure you can and as athletes, this is important to capture, is make sure you can, your process or your brand aligns with the brand of the brand or the company that's you're trying to connect with. Make sure there's some alignment there, right?
Correct.
So that's very important. So how do you evaluate? You mentioned Will's Camp reached out to you, and have you only done one deal up until this moment, or there have been more?
This is the one deal
Okay.
so far. I won't share too many details, but yeah, I'm exploring some different ways of going at NIL. This arrangement with Will Levis was just kind of, as I described earlier, it's a bit of a unicorn. Like everything just fit so perfectly that it was just a matter of like getting the paperwork together. Now, in some of these others, yeah, people are going to look for some typical things. You're looking for reach, engagement. Those things are pretty easy to track, and there's several softwares that you can leverage that will, give you an idea of how much pull any influencer really has. So most people are going to start there. To be honest, that's not necessarily how I've started. I've built out the strategy of, what kind of things is the brand going to move forward with in 2023?
Okay.
And what kind of athletes potentially match that? And then, also, I encourage everyone to, on the brand side, to get creative. Like I'm not only looking for, let's call it physical athletics. I think esports. There's other opportunities in NIL that I think are rich and haven't really been mined probably as thoroughly as they should. So those are the kind of things that I'm digging into now.
You mentioned the word influencer, and I think athletes now that NIL is a play, they become the new influencers out there just essentially overnight. So is it only, and we talk about influence and reach. So if you're looking at an athlete, how much does social media, their following play a part of that? And what are some of the other, factors that need to play a part of that outside of just the social media following?
Yeah, I mean it's largely going to be social media.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, most of the softwares, that's kind of what they're largely looking at. There's other things like YouTube, which isn't necessarily considered social media by some, but essentially is, especially when people are tethering their channels together, right? So it's going to depend on the athlete. So for instance, if I'm trying to find someone in the esports space, obviously I'm going to be looking at YouTube and Twitch, things like
Right.
that are like more appropriate to like the type of athlete they are. For most other, like, I don't want to say traditional athletes, but I think you get the point. For them, uh, it's largely going to be two platforms: it's Instagram and Twitter. And the reason I say Twitter is it's always been a platform that's been very, very rich for sports
Mm-hmm.
since its beginning. So for athletes, it's actually relevant. For a lot of other brand purposes, Twitter may not be nearly as relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but when it comes to sports, yeah, I mean, there's significant chatter on in that space.
So I'm curious to know the outcome, right? You connected with Will. What has the impact for your brand? What has that looked like, and how do you measure the ROI with Will so far?
Yeah, and I'll also start with them, coming to us. I've made it clear that they came to us with a pretty tight, you know, package, if you will. Like, here's a great offering. Here's all the reasons it makes sense, and they actually already had some data for his return on investment for some of these other brands that he's partnered with. So again, they brought everything to the table, and including, this isn't just some splashy play. Like, this actually works.
Mm-hmm.
The awesome thing is that that's absolutely proven itself in a few different ways. So one of the tools that I do use to track reach, audience engagement, etc., is called Meltwater, and you can look at how things are getting spread across the internet, whether that's social media or various publications, and it'll give you an average of what that audience size looks like. So what's been great about Will is every time he's engaged with us, meaning engaged with L8, we've seen a spike. So in that, over the year, you've got a line graph demonstrating that when people are actually talking about the brand, and also when people are talking about the brand positively or negatively. So not only did he give us spikes, but the sentiment was always incredibly positive. So that I love to see. The other thing that's been great is, of course, brands want to, you know, figure out how to create some attribution model that proves that it actually sold something. The great thing for us is, we do sell merch on, behalf of the brand.
Mm-hmm.
Got one here. Um, but the nice thing there is we did involve Will with our L8 Days of Christmas. So it's a promo we run every year. There's usually, 6 to 8 items. Sometimes some of the days just offer kind of like free shipping or something like that. But the, the the relevant thing for Will is we got him involved, and that was our single highest sales day for that period through the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one where it's like, Will got involved, and we literally had our best sales. So that's about as direct a return on investment as you can often get, because sometimes tracking things all the way through, like how
Right.
did social media like give us lift on sales, can be a little bit more challenging. There are models that make it feasible, but it's admittedly like tougher to track something like that. Where we have direct online sales, it's um, a direct attribution.
Right. You said in the beginning when you started the conversation how when I asked about the question that they came to you with data and how
Mm-hmm.
that you can essentially they can help your brand. So that's another thing that we want to capture. If to the people that's listening, you want to come to people that you want to have some data, you want to do some research to know,
Mm-hmm.
not just throw out random pitches. Hey, just you're basically trying to boil the ocean, as we say. You want to know specifically of why you're reaching out to certain brands if you want to get NIL deals. Um, and that leads me to my next question. How many people do you have reaching out to you per day? They probably saw this. They saw a lot of traffic. Like, how many people are reaching out to you?
I will say there was definitely an influx the moment this partnership was announced. It's not. I wouldn't say it's every day. I would say it's probably more like bi-weekly. And there are athletes that reach out directly.
Mm-hmm.
We do get some of those, but most of the time it's reps, and they represent
Mm-hmm.
either a handful or sometimes a couple dozen athletes, depending on who you're speaking with. So they're almost always kind of reaching out through email. That's the common methodology. I may have gotten one through LinkedIn, but that's it. They usually don't, kind of cold call. Starts with email.
Yeah, I want to dig into that because I've seen a lot of articles so far about NIL. How one article that sticks in my mind is the NIL money is not getting to Western New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
And another one that I think about, I'm from Southeast Missouri, so I don't know how much is actually getting down to those regions. When I see a lot of stuff, it's individuals that are at Power Five,
Mm-hmm.
basketball, football, and you're seeing some others sprinkled around there. If I am an individual, I don't have a rep. I'm an athlete, and I have like
Mm-hmm.
my parents reaching out on doing representing me on my behalf. What are some do's and don'ts? I know preparation is key. No, we make sure we do the data, how we can fit with the brand. But what are some things that you saw in those reach out messages? You say you shouldn't do this or you should do this.
Um, One of the things that is helpful is, just being transparent. If you're reaching out,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, Will Levis obviously has a large following because,
Right.
he's nationally prominent. Everyone knows, like you said, that, going into the year, he was tabbed as a high draft pick. So that's a high level of visibility. Now, for other athletes that reach out to us, it's all over the place. And what I do appreciate when I say transparency is they come into the conversation clearly stating, this is where I am. Their reach is what it is. So it's nice when they clearly state that up front. And the reason I say that is otherwise, like, I have to obviously go off and do the diligence, which takes some additional time to do that. And if they come in, up front, with that information, anything that they can provide, within the email, essentially, that kind of cuts down time, adds value. So as far as the don'ts, I kind of highlighted that before, is, coming in with just kind of a generic offering um, is difficult because, then I have to figure out why this ties to the brand. Like,
Right.
why is this strategically relevant?
Yeah, they're
And
making
if
you do the work.
it's the sad truth. And I admittedly like hate saying that,
Mm-hmm.
but in this role, more than some of my other roles, because before this I was 100% agency side. So this is the
Mm-hmm.
first time I've been, quote unquote, brand side. Brand side, the amount of vendors and different partners or people that want to be partners that reach out on a daily basis is significant. Not necessarily, like I said, NIL, but just overall.
Right.
So anytime anyone, even outside of NIL, has a clear distinction of like why, you know, we should work together, they have a massive advantage. It's true. So those are two key things. And then the other thing is also just kind of be realistic. If you don't have a massive following, then what you would be looking for compensation, needs to reflect that because in the end, um, any reasonable CMO isn't looking to just do some cool new splashy thing. Like, yeah, it's 2 years in, so it is kind of splashy and it's interesting. But I can assure you, like myself and other people in this role, can't afford, frankly, to make decisions that won't lead to some kind of return. At some point, um, there's an old saying in advertising, you make it sell or else.
You're right. So I have and those are great points. You mentioned that, yeah, a lot of people just shoot out blanket emails and they're not specific enough of why they want to work. So I'm envisioning just shooting out an email saying my Twitter following is this amount, this is this amount, so you can just see links to it right away.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Um, Someone would always tell me, and even in my sales career, value proposition, make it easy for someone to say yes, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you want to take away as much work on your end as possible. Um, I'm curious when I've looked in NIL and I see a lot of people are talking about these numbers and the monetary value that you can offer, but I would take a slightly different approach. And I wanted to throw this by you to see what you think if someone approached you with this type of a deal. Um, Not monetary. Say, for instance, I approach you, Kevin, and I don't have a large following. And I'm talking to the kids that are in these places that are not getting they don't have reps, right? They might be doing the outreach themselves. Um, and I reach out to you, and what I'm offering is essentially, I don't have a large following, But what I do is I'm on a campus, pretty populated campus. Say I'm on the University of Kentucky. Um, I can be a brand ambassador, right? I
Mhm.
can, walk around and talk about your brand and just maybe give out free sodas and try to drum up traffic that way. And I'm not looking for monetary value. In return, I know in the future I want to be a CEO or a CMO. I'm looking for maybe twice a month, a sit down with you and your CEO to talk about business, to talk about different strategies, how you approach life, and how you approach different things. What do you think about that type of deal outside of just monetary?
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, I won't go into some of the details of like future plans because I do, want to when we get to those, announce them and create some kind of fun and get some chatter going around it. But yeah, some of the things that we're currently talking about or talking about with various partners, it's not monetary. Some of it, for instance, could be trade. Like we have a product, and we can do that in kind um, with some of these arrangements. So something like you described is actually one of the other points I was going to make of a do is like be creative. Like if
Right.
you come to us with something that's again a little unique, a little different, and I wouldn't say what you described as like necessarily risk taking, but those kind of things do build excitement, and they also, again, like you said, give me a much easier way to say yes than if you come to us asking for X dollars, and it's extremely hard for us to justify that like return on the spend.
For sure. All right. So wrapping this up and getting here to the end, I want to get some very quick, some do's and don'ts for parents. A lot of parents are helping their kids out, and they're probably doing some outreach, and a lot of students are doing it themselves. And also for brands are looking to get in this space, and they're probably not in this space now. They'll watch this interview. And actually, I'm sending this interview to someone too because they wanted to see how it's well before they come and do one. So hopefully we've done well. Uh, for a brand, give me. I don't know if you have three, whatever, but what are some must? Okay, if you're getting to the space, you must look at this first.
Um, there's a few things. You're a parent, and depending on your 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 child athlete, I will say because of some of the things that brands also need for like legal protection, um, I would still consider like reaching out to one of these rep services. And the reason I say
Mm,
that is most of them do have that covered. So all the like legalese, getting these
mm-hmm.
documents drafted, the brands are ultimately going to have can be helpful because like unless you can serve as your own lawyer, there are some things within these agreements that admittedly are probably a lot easier if you do enlist those services.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I was going to add is I don't know if you put this on do and don't, but it's a do and a don't. Is the other thing I've noticed is in talking to other people, we didn't have that with Will. Like Will was extremely flexible, extremely easy to work with. And I say that knowing he had a very complicated, complex, very full schedule.
Right.
So the other thing I would worry about is, to be honest, if a parent came to me is like, how much am I going to be dealing with like the student athlete, the parent? Like at some point, we come up with these ideas, they need to be approved, they need to be executed. If I got the feeling that someone was going to be honest, just bluntly like difficult to work with, I would pass. You know, that's just kind of like it's true in any kind of like um, talent pool, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I've like I said, I worked at agency. That's one of the things you're looking at when you're selecting talent is you would talk to the people and hope that they were easy to work with, could handle some basic direction. And yeah, if I thought that someone's quote unquote handler was going to um, cause extra problems, then I just wouldn't be interested. And I think there's enough evidence all around of like why that's kind of critical, you know, as far as the thought process.
Wow, that's impactful. So easy to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And list the services of others. I will ask you this, and I'm gonna challenge you on that question when you say list the services of others. A lot of these students that are listing like those reps, the reps are only looking at the students that are at these Power Fives, that are at these bigger
Yeah.
schools. So I would guess if you're an individual that are not and you're reaching out directly, um, you still have to have that information. How does someone, and you might not know this, I have my opinion on this, but I want to hear yours first. How would someone overcome that? I don't have the services. I'm not at a big time Power Five, so I can't get the rep. You
Right.
know, what are we doing? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. To be honest, I if I don't really have a good answer to something, I pass. And on that one, I
Mhm.
pass because I'm not sure exactly how to go about it. What I did speak to that I would hold um, still true in that scenario is even if you're not bringing in a rep, some sort of representation that covers the contractual part of it.
Right.
Unless, like I said, unless you're already like, the parent could be an expert in that field and actually, knows how to deal with the legal end of things. That's the part that even if you can't get a rep, I still would recommend just because it's going to be easier um, on the parent and the student athlete because otherwise the brand will be bringing in their legal counsel and essentially will just kind of be in servitude to whatever they draft up.
Right. I'll hop in here and I will say this to the athlete and to the parents. I would say first look at your institution. A lot of these schools now they're popping up with all this different type of NIL education. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely go there first and see what's available to you. Would be step one. My second, if you don't have that at your school, another thing I would do is I would literally call. You might not be big enough for a rep to take you on, but that doesn't mean you can't reach out to one and see what they're drafting up contractually in a sense of a
Mm-hmm.
contract, right? And just see,
Yep.
what are the caveats, how you can get representation. So there are all ways that you can go to do it. My third one is something that I've done a lot. If you need representation, if you need someone to drop a contract, one of my favorite freelancing platforms is Upwork. You can find a lawyer on there, a freelancer that literally can drop you off a contract, at least be able to look at some information. I've done this for my own businesses to have that extra voice, those extra set of eyes. So there's all different type of ways to actually do that. So I don't want, okay, I don't have a rep to stop you from going out and trying to make a deal. There's still ways to go out there. As you said, this is all about creativity.
Yep.
So be creative. You can't be creative here. You probably can't be creative with the brand, right? So it's
Right.
so there's going to be there's going to be some issues there. So it's all about creativity. So Kevin, I really appreciate you hopping on. Your episode number one. So you're setting the tone for my first NIL story. So I really appreciate you hopping on. I'll give it to you the last word. Anything else you want to say to the athletes, to the brands that are hopping into the NIL space?
The only thing I'll add is, again, kind of coming back to what I said earlier, is I do encourage other brands to jump outside of the Power Five space, take on some of these, let's call it lesser known athletes or universities, because again, can't dive into what I'm looking into, but currently I am exploring that space for 2023 because there's a lot of great athletes. And I think if NIL is going to service athletes the way it should, it needs to get outside of the big schools, football, basketball. There's a lot of great athletes doing any number of things. My alma mater is a big wrestling school, for instance. So,
Okay.
and that's the kind of athlete that still needs representation um, and opportunity.
For sure. Well, Kevin, I appreciate it. To everyone that's listening, make sure you subscribe to My First NIL. We're going to drop stories like this one. The first story we've covered. As we can see, Kevin has more. Hopefully, we can get him back over here later when all these other deals pop through and talk about these other deals. But this has been First NIL. Everyone have a great rest of your day and subscribe to the channel. Thanks, Ev. Bye.
Thank you.